Hello, it's September 28th, 2021, and yesterday I was going to do an episode about R.E.M's ninth album, Monster, which was released on the 27th of September 1994. I thought that's going to be a good idea. I can do a 27th kind of anniversary thing because I'm, like many of my favourite groups, never want to miss an anniversary or an occasion. However, I started doing it and I started feeling a little bit poorly and I stopped. So here it is, a day later. I'm going to be talking about Monster, an album that has become a charity shop staple in the UK. It sold 9 million copies, of which I have approximately 1/2 millionth of that amount here. I'm sure stats nerds will be able to work out exactly how many 0.0001% that constitutes. It sold 141,000 copies in the first 4 days in the UK alone, and it's one hell of an album. Now, some of you will disagree with me because I think that Monster is the best R.E.M. album. Does that make me wrong? Very possibly. It might even, in fact, make me king of Wrongtown, but I'm very happy there because I really, really love this record, and I'm going to spend 45 minutes or so talking out my mobile phone, and by extension, you who live in the internet, all about it. I think it was poorly received upon release. Lots of people were expecting an Automatic for the People Part 2. Those previous two albums, the mandolin strums of Out of Time and Automatic for the People, were another further step in the evolution of R.E.M. Along from the Green album. And so people were used to, in their eyes, it was the kind of rock that your mum and dad would listen to when they're having a sad, hard day or driving in the car on the way to the supermarket. It's a very popular genre. Sad dad rock, of course, in the 90s included an awful lot of Pink Floyd, a lot of Genesis. R.E.M. were starting to be ushered into that arena, and I don't think they felt particularly comfortable about it. And a lot of people bought it expecting something which was absolutely not what they got at all. They got something very, very different indeed. The story starts a little bit earlier than that with the 1993 Christmas single. Here it is, Silver Bells, I think, and Christmas Time Is Here from A Charlie Brown Christmas. Every year the band released a single, normally recorded in demo sessions for their albums at John Keane's studio. John Keane being the guy that played additional guitar, keyboards and bass for the 1992 show at the 40 Watt Club that was on the Automatic for the People release. And his studio was also where the band recorded their demos. And here it is, the 1993 fan club single, the Happy Holiday Hoedown single, featuring a lovely version of Silver Bells, which I think has Mike Mills on lead vocals. After Out of Time, I don't think Mike sang a lead vocal on any R.E.M. album track, although he did do on a couple of covers, including Silver Bells here. I love these Christmas singles. This is numbered for my pleasure, number 1697. And the band kept that tradition of the Christmas single going all the way through to their very last year in activity as a band, 2010. But of course, the first fruits that we had of what was happening elsewhere was the release in early September of this very single, What's the Frequency, Kenneth, which really kind of highlighted a new kind of weird R.E.M. that nobody had ever really heard before. There was no past precedent in any of their previous work for something that sounded quite like this. R.E.M. were new, they were back, they were weird, and they were different. And they were not the R.E.M. that you knew them. This is spiky, not grungy, but kind of like a crusty, almost classic, distorted, broken rock sound, which the band had never previously done. So it was as if they wrote standard R.E.M. songs, stuck them through a bunch of fuzz pedals and a bunch of sound effects, and came up with this weird and unusual version of R.E.M. By the way, it only took me 27 years to work out what the cover of What's the Frequency, Kenneth is, and actually it is a collection of bottle-shaped sweets, cola bottles in a bottle. I only really got that when I was looking at it recently and seeing a slightly different version of it in a tour program, when I was doing some of my research. What's the Frequency, Kenneth is one of my very, very favourite R.E.M. songs. But at the time it came out, lots of people were like, where is R.E.M. and what have you done with them? Because this isn't R.E.M. It's R.E.M. okay, and it's definitely the best form of R.E.M. in my opinion, because like U2 with Acton Baby, what R.E.M. did when they released Monster was that they decided they were going to take a slightly different view upon reality than they'd done previously. So the albums before Monster, as I've said, Out of Time, Automatic with the People, achingly sincere in the same way that U2's pre-Acton Baby albums, the Joshua Tree and Rattle and Hum in particular, were very much wear your broken heart on your sleeve kind of records. Monster was like Acton Baby, taking the cliche from Oscar Wilde that a man tells the truth when he is wearing a mask, and the whole of the album Monster is around masks and disguises and poses and the gap between reality and what your perception of reality could be. And the songs go really deep into that. Part of that is undoubtedly inspired by Michael Stipe's experiences of fame and how the person that Michael Stipe is was very different from the person that he was perceived to be by the outside world. And of course, you've got right in the opening track here, What's the Frequency, Kenneth? You've got a lyric that's inspired by an assault upon a newscaster who, when he was being attacked and kicked and on the floor, he was asked frequently, What's the frequency, Kenneth? And then that inspired, I think, the lyric to the song, which is very much around, and all of the lyrics actually in the album take this same kind of stream of consciousness approach where there's almost like a combined cumulative effect, waves and waves of words that kind of almost overflow outside of the mouth of the speaker. And so you think the second line is, I was brain dead, locked out, numb, not up to speed. And then the second one is, I'd studied your cartoons, radio, music, TV, movies, magazines. And then, of course, butterfly decal, rearview mirror, dog in the scene. You smile like a cartoon, tooth for tooth. You said that irony was the shackles of youth. These are lyrics which almost feel like a half-remembered dream of some kind of reality, of someone trying to make sense of the world that's around them through watching television, through watching magazines, through watching whatever it is that they're being told about the perception of reality and trying to understand what it was. There's also a couple of fantastic lines in here which are endlessly quotable. One is, irony is the shackles of youth. The other one is the line about withdrawal and disgust is not the same as apathy. Now, a key line in this song is you wore a shirt of violent green. You wore our expectations like an armoured suit. I couldn't understand. Now, for a lot of the period following this, and one of the main tour T-shirts, which sadly I left in the other room, Michael Stipe wore a shirt of violent green with a black star on it, representing, that very lyric, the shirt of violent green, saying to you, whether you were there to pick it up or not, is to say, I am that guy. That's how I feel. I wore your expectations like an armoured suit. It's a fantastic R.E.M. song, and putting it technically, it rocks like a bastard. And that is one of the most important things about What's the Frequency, Kenneth, as well as the fact that the band played it pretty much every show after it was released. It became a canon classic in R.E.M.'s arsenal of work. Next up, of course, came the release of this unusual and weird beastie, now 27 years and a day old, Monster. I think Monster is a perfect title for this album. There is no other title which could really describe what this is. Now, first and foremost, you look at that and you go, well, that doesn't look like an R.E.M. album. It looks like a really good album. It looks like a good visual image, a strong visual image, but it doesn't look like an R.E.M. album. What it is, by the way, is a bear's face printed onto a balloon, and the photograph is a photograph of a kind of like collapsed balloon that hasn't been inflated. It's a really bizarre image, so bizarre, in fact, that the body of the animal doesn't exist and had to be created for the album artwork. So, looking at Monster, I'll talk about the title of the album. It's the most appropriate title the album could ever have, because the monster describes a number of things that are happening. First of all, the monster is describing the experience that you have about the voraciousness and the viciousness of fame. Lady Gaga, of course, obviously, or Lady Gaga, as Matt Berry says, did the Fame Monster about 15 years later. But fame itself can be regarded as a monster. It does monstrous things to people. But also, all of the songs that are on this are around that gap between expectation, reality, perception, and reality. It's a post-fame album. It's almost a Zeropa style distance, an ironic distance between what's actually happening and what is described in the songs, as if Stipe has stepped out of himself and is writing songs from a third person perspective about experiences he could have had or could have been near to. And a great writer does this. I'm not saying I'm a great writer, but a lot of the stuff that I write is around things that I've seen in conversation, or moments that I've heard about, and I try and understand or try and make sense of human interaction from a third person. Stipe is doing exactly the same thing here. He's writing at an ironic distance, and that distance is to protect himself from the sincerity that he wore his heart on his sleeve. He wears our expectations in this album like an armored suit itself. And that's reflected in the sound of the album, but it's very clearly reflected in the lyrics. There's a gap between the relationship. There's a gap in the relationship between reality and activity. There's a gap between who the protagonist and the narrator of these songs is and who everyone else thinks that they are. And sometimes that's intentional and sometimes it absolutely isn't. And it kind of reflects also what had happened to R.E.M. When R.E.M. released Green in 1989, they were kind of like the best kept secret in the world. If you knew that genre, if you read the Inky Melody Makers and the NMEs, you knew about R.E.M. You knew R.E.M. were really good. You also knew that hardly anybody else knew who R.E.M. were. They were like the biggest secret in the world. With Out of Time and Automatic for the People, R.E.M. became the worst kept secret in the galaxy. Everybody knew and everybody was part of it, and alongside U2, R.E.M. became huge. I would never have expected them to be a band that filled stadiums. When I got into them in 1989, and I was buying the singles because I couldn't afford to go and see them play the theatres, if someone said to me 6 years later they'll be headlining Murrayfield Stadium in Edinburgh and the Milton Keynes Bowl for 2 days and 4 nights at Wembley Arena. This tour shirt, by the way, is from the 4 nights at Wembley Arena, which didn't actually happen. I figure it's okay to buy a tour shirt for a tour that you didn't go to if the tour itself didn't actually happen and you did actually have tickets. So I'm okay. My conscience is clear about wearing a shirt for a show I didn't go to. But headlining 4 nights at Wembley Arena as opposed to 2 nights or even 1 night at the Hammersmith Odeon, I would have been like, I'd never have imagined that would have happened. R.E.M. became the worst kept secret in the universe, and to be honest, I was overjoyed about it. I want the bands that I love to be big. I want them to be, frankly, bloody enormous. I want them to be prosperous. I want them to have financial security. I want them to continue to make music as long as they want to make music and to be able to afford to do so, and having success is the way to achieve that. As long as you don't, I think, compromise your artistic integrity or your vision, then being absolutely huge, I'm fully in support of. And the album Monster there is no better title for the album than Monster. It describes 3 things. Firstly, the person who is singing a lot of these songs is a monster because they're not a very nice person, and there's a degree of fraud between that person and who they present themselves to be. And with using that approach to the songs, Stipe is also writing about, in a very oblique way, around the gap between who people think he is and who he actually is. And Monster is also an album around the monstrous kind of side that fame brings to you. It surrounds you with yes men that tell you that every decision is a work of genius. And it also, on the other hand, also turns other people into monsters. They become jealous, they become envious, they become cruel and rude and abrupt because they can be. And I remember I met a guy that played, I think it was football. Now, bear in mind, I'm completely allergic to football. And he played football for England. He's quite famous in his field. And he couldn't comprehend the fact that I just had no clue who he was. He probably thought I was some kind of jerk that was trying to do a power flex by deliberately pretending I didn't know who he was. And I was just like, I don't know who you are, mate. I haven't got... my brain was going, I haven't got a fucking clue who you are. I have no idea. But sometimes fame turns people into monsters, and sometimes it makes monsters out of the people that were around them. And this album, through the prism of talking about relationships, kind of addresses that in a way that I think is certainly more articulate than some of the other releases which have come out. So what I have to do is I have to talk about the album overall. And in order to do so, rather than me show you the 2005 DVD edition, and by the way, I've got lots of CD singles and 7 inches down here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk you through the special edition of the album that was released in 1994. So starting with Monster and all the way through to the Accelerate album. R.E.M. albums, because the band were famous and successful and financially secure, R.E.M. albums were generally released in 2 editions on the day of release. One was the music experience, the LP, the CD. Another one was a more deluxe edition of the album. Now, when I was talking earlier about the bear's head here, which was photographed off a balloon, they had no body, but the artists and the band created, under Michael Stipe's visual guidance, an image of the monster itself, of the bear here, and its face. That is the monster, which is the album, and to an extent, there's a whole bunch of stuff about people in bear suits and people wearing masks and becoming animals and in touch with their inner self, but that itself is a monster. Now, the special edition here is a 52-page book pack, which I'm going to slowly kind of scroll through. What we've got is we've got lots of artwork here with fragments of lyrics and parts of discarded lyrics from the album. But each one of them is in itself a little line from a song or a part of a song that actually stands on its own. Occasionally I tweet out pictures, like for example, all the birds look down and laugh on me, clumsy, crawling out of my skin. That is undoubtedly a lyric which Stipe wrote, which he didn't use for the album, unless it's in the album and I've just forgotten it's in there. But again, this visual graphic design, there's something about it that's inherently R.E.M. The fact that, one of the opening lines of one of the songs, I think Circus Envy, here comes that awful feeling again. There's a sense of disconnection. These are images which don't necessarily belong together, alongside the use of a comic book character called Migraine Boy, who's here, by the way, who Stipe somehow felt some kind of connection and affinity to. The deluxe editions of the albums that have been released over the past few years have contained very similar packaging for Automatic for the People and Out of Time, so you can rack all of these up next to each other. But what they are showing, and by the way, that's the picture of the cover from What's the Frequency Kenneth there, you can see that it's candy bottled in a spooky looking jar. Is what you've got is you've got just a kind of like a sense of a world that's off base, out of shape, slightly off kilter. There's something that's not quite right. Like when you see a picture of somebody and it's perfectly symmetrical and you go, I can't quite tell, but I know that's not quite right. This is the same kind of impression that we're getting here, is just pictures of bizarre and unusual abstract things. These are very, very similar, by the way, since R.E.M. ceased working together. Michael Stipe has become a more prolific photographer and has published a number of books of his photographs, and it looks and feels exactly like this, but without the R.E.M. Angle to it, really. And there's one of the lines from What's Frequency Kenneth that's not published on the 7-inch sleeve on the back, is I never understood, don't fuck with me, I couldn't understand. And one of the early titles for the album was Yes, I Am Fucking With You. An idea of Michael Stipe being very open about it from a lyrical perspective, going, this isn't me, I'm not here, this isn't happening, I'm pretending to be somebody else, I'm pretending to be a different person. This photograph here, by the way, was used on the cover of the Tongue promotional single, not the actual retail single, which is, sadly I don't have the promotional single, but I have the picture in the book, so that's good enough for me. This, for example, is a picture which I think appears on the Crush with Eyeliner single cover as well, or maybe on the back, I'm not sure, somewhere. But what we do is, we're getting a very unusual sense of a world that doesn't quite fit together completely and utterly. And that's the more familiar kind of image that you get from the back of the LP. So somewhere deep inside here is a book, and you get the Monster CD inside here, flip top lid, and you've got hang on a second, I'll get the CD out. What you've got is you've got a unique graphic design on the CD as well, so it's only on the book edition of the album, which is here. So that kind of gives you an idea of the visual kind of approach that the deluxe edition of Monster has. Of course, what the band have done, which I really, really appreciate, is if you're just into the music, the deluxe edition contains no exclusive music. It just contains different packaging, which means if you're a packaging snob and you love a good bit of typography, a bit of kerning, and a bit of font use, then obviously it's absolutely great for you. And if you just want the music, you can do so affordably and cheaply without getting what we might perceive to be a castrated version of the album. This is the American only book version of the album. Second single from the album, by the way, is Bang and Blame, a song that I think has largely been written out of history. It was released in a number of formats. I'll get to the CD singles later. Standard black vinyl 7-inch, backed with a K version. All of the singles have on their B-side instrumental versions of the songs. Most bands, when they're recording albums, prepare an instrumental version which is used for promotional purposes. For example, when a band appears on television, and rather than hook it up and play it live, they often just sing over a pre-recorded backing track. The backing tracks are instrumental. Bang and Blame, What's the Frequency, Kenneth, all the singles contain these alternate versions of the singles. And the third single from the album, by the way, is Crush with Eyeliner, which came with a 1995 calendar. So I'm going to show you the calendar because, again, it takes the imagery which you've seen from the rest of it. And, I had this calendar up on my wall at the time. It was a lovely way of getting a calendar for the price of a 7-inch single, which was about £1.99. And of course, if you want to look at pictures of bored millionaires wearing sunglasses, this is exactly what it is. And what you can see is a lot of these photographs also appear in the Monster book version. Not that necessarily that's of any particular interest, but there you are. There's Bill posing with a truck, and Michael Stipe posing with some fur. This photograph, by the way, became very popular. It was used a lot on promotional material around about the time, and this is the band in the sea. Crush with Eyeliner came on an orange vinyl single. I must admit, I'm a sucker for a bit of coloured vinyl, and bearing in mind that the Idols have released, or more correctly announced, their fourth album, Crawler, today, I suspect I'm going to end up with a couple of coloured vinyl versions of that. Because why buy a black vinyl album, although black is a colour, if you can buy other versions as well? I don't know. Maybe I'm the kind of person, I'm completely the kind of format snob that they're designed for, because I'll go, yeah, I'll buy that. I've already got it 4 times, but I'll buy it again, and it helps them get into the charts. Crush with Eyeliner is, I think, a great song. It's kind of like a dirty Sonic Youth style single. It doesn't sound like anything R.E.M have done before. Neither has Bang and Blame, neither has What's the Frequency, Kenneth, or any of the singles until we get to single number 4 from the album, Strange Currencies. Strange Currencies, again backed with a version K instrumental version, comes on a truly screen-breakingly green form of vinyl, and Strange Currencies is, in Michael Stipe's words, his very own attempt at writing an R.E.M song. Not an R.E.M song, an R.E.M and an In Excess song. And it's a song about unrequited love. It's a song about wanting and not necessarily getting. And bearing in mind all the songs on the album, in my perspective anyway, are around charting some form of relationship fraud, some form of romantic unfulfillment, so to speak. There's also, as I've mentioned before, in the album, there's lots of times when Stipe's lyrics almost fall over themselves in order to be understood, and it creates a kind of weird stream of consciousness approach. So there's the lines here where he sings, "I'll ring you up, call you down, sign your name, secret love, make it rhyme, take you in and make you mine." And then there's a section right at the end, the last verse, where he sings, "With love comes strange currencies, and here is my appeal. I need a chance, a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, a word, a signal, a nod, a little breath, just to form myself, to catch myself, to make it real." And yeah, man, I really felt that song at certain points in my life. I really have. Fifth single from the album, last single from the album, is Tongue, a song that was introduced on the appropriate tour by Michael as this song has tits, which perhaps is not necessarily the way in which you should describe the song, but Tongue is perhaps it's written from a female perspective. That's why Michael Stipe is singing in a falsetto. It's describing very clearly kind of like the perspective of someone who has had a number of unsuccessful romantic entanglements. Um, it's got some really dark lyrics in it, which I will of course get to in a moment once I've finished showing you the 7-inch packaging that we've got. And the packaging is absolutely fantastic at this period. You know, you can clearly tell this band are, I think, to use industry parlance, are an investment and a top priority. So there's a lyric in here which goes, "I am ashamed to say ugly girls know their fate. Anybody can get laid. You want a room with a fire escape. I want to tell you how much it pains me. Don't leave that stuff all over me. It pains me." Um, that's pretty damn explicit. And when he's singing about that stuff, I think we all know what that stuff is. Seen quite a lot online. Tongue is a song about being unsatisfied in relationships, in relationship environments, and also I think perhaps about how there's there's an unsymmetrical approach to relationships, and this will sound kind of very cynical, but as he writes in the song, is ugly girls can get laid, and you know if as I've said to people I've known that have not been particularly good at relationships, is if you're not fussy, it's very easy. If you really don't care about who you are. By the way, if you're the kind of person that's interested in getting low numbers for singles, the number that I've got for this Tongue single is number 41. That's not worth very much. Obviously, if it was the Beatles' White Album, that I could probably buy a car with the value of having a number 41, because it came out of the same box that the Beatles themselves had their copies in. But Tongue is, in my opinion, one of the absolute finest R.E.M. songs. Massively underrated. It should be loved and adored and shouted from the rooftops. And it feels like I barely even got to talking about the album. So let's go through some of the songs on the album I haven't mentioned. So Monster, a 12-track album, 50 minutes. This is the 2019 vinyl edition, which in everything but inner sleeve reflects entirely the original release. It's got a sticker, it's got a slightly different set of copyright things right at the bottom, but otherwise complete replica of the 1994 original, and much cheaper. As I've mentioned before, the first song, "What's the Frequency, Kenneth?", lays out very clearly what the whole album is about. It's about the gap between perception and reality, between the public image and the private image that we have around who you are versus who people think you are. And Crush with Eyeliner kind of starts almost the beginning of the narrative structure of the LP. Crush with Eyeliner, as I've said before, I think Thirst and More appears on it. Got dirty fuzzy guitar all over the thing, but it's also got a lyric that's very clearly about kind of like desire and ambition and wanting to be with someone, around "I'm smitten, I'm the real thing, won't you be my Valentine, my crush with eyeliner." And it's almost a kind of like an imploration. It's the start of the album, so there's two themes that run all the way through Monster. The first one, and by the way, this is the 2019 6-disc multi-version of it. The first song and the third song, "What's the Frequency, Kenneth?" and "King of Comedy," very clearly address fame and perception versus reality. So King of Comedy has a number of lines around money, exploitation, magazines, television, but it ends with everybody singing, "I am not a commodity, I'm not a commodity," as if to say, I'm not your commodity. This version of me that you think exists, this Michael Stipe, this rock star guy, that's, you've commodified a person and turn them into a demographic and turn them into an image. You've reduced them into a series of basic positions which you can then pose like an action man in order to sell on television. So, you know, bald head, weird hat, green shirt, you know, quirky lyrics, slightly awkward, and as he sings in King of Comedy, "I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm bi." So he's also addressing issues around sexual identity and gender politics here. It's not specific to anything, and Stipe, I think, is now come out as a gay man. At the time, I think he was gay, straight, and bi on the basis of what I can work out. But to be honest, I didn't really care. What I cared about, and what anyone with half a brain would care about, is not his orientation, but his artistic development and the stuff that he sings and how he sings it and how good he is at doing whatever it is that he does. But at this point, the album, by the way, is completely Michael Stipe playing a rock star called Michael Stipe. It's an image, it's a projection of a part of his personality. And there's brittle and raw emotion that's in the album, but it's all hidden under armor, like an armored suit. It's under barnacles, it's under effects pedals, it's under treatments and phasing and all these type of things. There's an element in this album of grieving a lost innocence, a kind of trust that you used to have. So, for example, if you're not famous, if you're just a dude and you meet another dude, then you have a conversation that's genuine between two people. If you're Michael Stipe or Peter Buck or whoever, and you meet somebody, that person may very well know a lot more about you than you know about them, and they may very well already have a set of preconceptions around who you are, what your identity is, what your politics might be, what your gender identity or sexual orientation might be. And so for the album Monster, what he's talking about is this fame thing that has been built around them. It's a monster, and it distorts and perverts genuine human communication that we have. So the album is kind of grieving that lost innocence of that sense of common and shared trust that we have between human beings. And the album addresses that in the field of talking about relationships. So, for example, as I've said before, What's the Frequency, Kenneth, King of Comedy, Star 69, pretty much every other song on the album, on the first side at least, kind of addresses that gap. And then we've got to a point where actually we're starting to deal with a narrator and a writer who is not particularly nice. There's a degree of romantic fraud in this album. So the person is very clearly kind of is like saying, this is the most honest I will ever be. I'm not a nice guy. I'm, and there's an element of that gap where he sings about wanting to be loved, but at the same point having that fear, having that element about trust that's in there. And then of course side two, you flip over, and the first song on side two, sorry CD people, but side two starts with Tongue, is just one of the finest R.E.M songs that there ever is in Tongue. It's beautiful, and it's an unsentimental look at what it is to be a woman in a patriarchal, masculine, sexist world before things like Me Too came about. Is to go, well, sexism is endemic and people treat women like objects and ugly girls can get laid. And it's a song that makes me sad, because it's a reality about, for a lot of people, more than half the people in the world, around how other people view them. They see them through the prism of the shape of their genitals and not through the prism of who they are. Bang and Blame is a song where I think the elements of romantic fraud and self-deception and perception and the fame thing all start to collide together. So there's a bit of gaslighting in this song, because the opening line is, if you could see yourself now, baby, it's not my fault. You used to be so in control. You bang and blame, it's not my thing. The tables have turned. The whole world hinges on your swings, your secret life of indiscreet discretion. I'd turn the screw and leave the screen. Don't point the finger, that's not my thing. It's a song about all those type of things. It's where the house of cards that has been built by a fraudster is starting to collapse in on himself. That house of cards that he's built around projecting who he is in order to get sex or love or money or acceptance or whatever that is starting to fall apart. Now I took Your Name is the, I think, ninth song on the album. Is also very clearly a fame song, because the opening lyric is, I wore the clothes you wanted, I took your name, I signed your living will, I smiled your face, I'm ready to close the book on NASA and outer space. It's all about, really, in my opinion, the devil's bargain, which is, I wore the clothes you wanted, I took your name. It's very much around going, you offered me something and I took it and it burnt me. And the flip side of that, and the reason, the sequencing is really not a coincidence. Song 10 is Let Me In, written on Kurt Cobain's guitar after Kurt Cobain had died, a lyric that is very, very clearly about trying to reach somebody that cannot be reached. I think it was probably written by Michael as kind of like an unsent letter to Kurt Cobain. A song about, let me in, let me in. It's just all about that. All the stars drip down like butter and promises are sweet. We hold out our pans, lift our hands to catch them. We eat them up, we drink them up. Let me in. I only wish that I could hear you whisper down. Mr. Fisher moved to a less peculiar ground to say goodbye. Nice try. It's all a lyric about trying to reach somebody that can't be reached. Now, in some respects, that could be emotional repression. In this case, it's probably more about somebody that's kind of insulated themselves or is so fearful of genuine human contact that it's really, really difficult to reach that state of communication between two human beings. And sometimes you have that with people that are in relationships, is even though bodies can be as close as bodies can get, is that their souls can't communicate. And that's a really difficult place to be in. There's a lot of questions in this album around, who am I? Where do I go? What position should I wear? What clothes should I wear? What name should I have? What face should I wear? Almost like all that kind of like that covering around it is an expectations like an armoured suit. And Stipe is kind of addressing that and also at the same point kind of playing a role of, well, I'm almost like a vampire now. I die on contact to naked sunlight and to being exposed. It's just a really deep, heavy album around that, and it frames the gap between reality and perception in the lines of almost trying to set, the relationship that he has or they have with their public image around being almost like a romantic element of somebody pretending to be somebody that they're not in order to get what they're not, or saying, no, that's not my thing, let it go, I'm not that person, I'm somebody else completely different. There are two songs on the album to go. Circus Envy, which is, I haven't got very much to say about that. I mean, all these songs have been written to be played live on a stage in front of 10,000 people. That's how the band recorded the album, is that they hired a small theatre. They played those songs, the same 12 songs, 14 songs in a row, endlessly on the stage until they felt like they'd honed those songs, playing them together as a group, and then they recorded those performances. That's how the album was made. Is that they play the songs. And if you listen to some of the later R.E.M. songs and some of the later R.E.M. albums, which perhaps aren't quite so focused, you very definitely get the sense that they've lost the ability to play together as musicians, but instead they're writing songs by committee, putting Lego blocks into the song and going, right, now we've constructed the song, as opposed to writing and playing the song. But when I get to the later albums, that's where I'll talk about it. And then the album closes on You, and You is, I think, a very underrated song. It's like all of them, it's difficult to really talk about what that song and what that album actually is, because it's so confused, the messaging is so dense, and the imagery that's used is they're trading often 3 or 4 ideas in the same song. They're approaching them from different perspectives, so to some extent you could say Monster sounds like 12 songs that are all the same, or the same song written 12 times. They all are. They're all about perception and reality, and around the monster that is the gap between perception and reality. Part of it is around being a romantic monster, is look at what this has done, it's turned me into a monster. Part of it is look at other people, they're monsters, and another one is around fame itself. I think I've talked myself into a corner there. I'm going to talk about this release, the 2005 CD and DVD version of it. This contains a 5-1 mix by Elliot Schneier, which I've never really pronounced, who did a special discrete 5.1 mix in 2005. It also features a short documentary and 3 songs which were performed on television alongside a standard CD booklet. This version is the only place to get the 5.1 mix on DVD. It is on the Blu-ray of the 2019 edition of the album. But before I get to that, I'm going to talk through the 1994 fan club single Sex Bomb Baby, backed with an R.E.M. original called Christmas in Tunisia. This one, again, recorded at, I think, John Keane's studio. No, it's recorded at R.E.M. studio in Athens, Georgia. a 7-inch single. Normally the 7-inch singles came with, you know, a series of stickers and little Christmassy related things. This is one of the more common fan club singles because obviously it's still on the back of Automatic for the People. People that got their subscriptions to the R.E.M fan club were doing so at this point before they realised what Monster sounded like. So the 1995 fan club single is considerably harder to find because I think a lot of people didn't renew their R.E.M fan club membership in 1995. They bought Monster and they were like, that's not my thing, I'm going to let it go. So I haven't talked about the CD singles which have come out yet. So there were 5 CD singles that were released for the album. The B-sides that are on this are the original versions of the 40 Watt Club show in 1992 that was released in full on the Automatic for the People box set. If you've got the Automatic for the People Super Deluxe set, you don't need 4 of these CD singles because the 12 tracks are on it. Just they've been remixed and remastered and recompiled from the original multi-tracks. 5th CD single, which you will need, is Tongue. Again, I cannot tell you how good this song is. It's bloody brilliant. It's one of my favourite R.E.M songs. This features 4 songs recorded live on Saturday Night Live, an American TV show in 1994, and the band's preparation and rehearsals for that show were on an hour-long documentary called Rough Cut. Rough Cut has not been officially released. Off-air broadcasts from VHS exist and have been uploaded to YouTube. And Rough Cut is a fascinating thing to watch. It's really seeing R.E.M right in the middle of the storm of their fame, and there's a couple of elements where perhaps the band themselves don't come off as perhaps the loveliest people in the world, but then it's in response to the people around them that are not quite star fucking, but not far off it. You know, there's always somebody there who's going to tell you that you're fantastic and amazing, and they want your autograph. And my uncle is a big fan, and can you just sign this bit of paper, please? And are you going to an after show? And if so, can I have guest list tickets? And I want to tell you how much your band means to me. And you know, if you're trying to keep your feet on the ground when everybody tells you that you're amazing, it's difficult to sometimes separate who you really are from that. And that, I think, is one of the driving factors that's inside the whole of the album. If you've seen the Radiohead documentary, Meeting People is Easy, it's a very, very similar kind of approach where you get this horrible sense of a life unraveling and losing touch with who you are and what it is. And of course the album reflects that kind of way in which fame and perception distorts reality. There is one extra release which I haven't mentioned, an American promo called Songs That Are Live, 4 songs recorded live. It's got versions of Crush with Eyeliner, Tongue, both recorded in Detroit, I Don't Sleep I Dream, recorded for Saturday Night Live, and Country Feedback, recorded in 1992 at the 40 Watt Club show. 2 of these songs on this CD, Crush with Eyeliner and Tongue, are not available anywhere else. So if you want to get everything, I'm afraid you do have to get that. The fan club singles, by the way, were also collected on this oddly on an unusual Monster era bootleg CD called Late at Night. Sold quite well, that one. And then in 2019, we had the multi-disc version of Monster, which I will get to shortly. 1995 saw the release of Parallel, a VHS. This is now the DVD edition with promotional videos from Automatic for the People and Monster. And it features some of the background projection screens that they played on tour. 1996 saw the release of the concert movie Road Movie, which I will address in more detail when I talk about the New Adventures in Hi-Fi album, because that is relevant, and some of the recordings on this were released at that point. 2018 saw the release of R.E.M at the BBC, which was a box set, and this features 8 CDs and a DVD. It does feature the Milton Keynes show from British Radio in 1995. However, the version of Milton Keynes that's on R.E.M at the BBC was edited, features some stage banter, has been taken out, and some general futzing about. There was also a promotional single from the Monster album, King of Comedy, an 808 state remix of King of Comedy released as a 12-inch, not released commercially, although it did, I think, appear as a B-side on the Electrolyte single. And the 808 state remix is one's vocal, one's instrumental. They're not particularly good, but if you're a completist, you do need to get the King of Comedy promotional 12-inch there. I don't know who sat down 808 State and went, guys, I've got a great idea, remix R.E.M, because it didn't quite work out quite that well. And the band went on tour in 1995, which again I'll talk about when I talk about New Adventures in Hi-Fi, because there's a lot of the recordings on New Adventures in Hi-Fi came from the tour. 2019 saw the release of this, the 6-disc version of Monster, frustratingly not packaged in the same size as any of the other previous reissues. It features a remastered version of the album. It features a selection of demos, which is I think 14 or 15 songs recorded during the demos, which Michael Stipe didn't write lyrics for. That includes early versions of songs that were later recorded and released, called Until the Day Is Done and The Final Straw. What was very, very clear is R.E.M wrote more songs than they released, and they often dug back into their old recordings later on to see if Michael would be inspired by songs that they thought still had worth but hadn't managed to release. Disc 3 is Monster Remixed. It's an alternate mix of the album, very different, well worth a listen. Discs 4 and 5 are R.E.M live in Chicago on the 3rd of June 1994. Disc 6 is a Blu-ray. The Blu-ray features the 5.1 mix from the 2005 DVD, promotional videos, and the first Blu-ray release of the Road Movie Concert, which has been remastered. I'm running out of time. I think Monster is an incredible album. It's probably my favourite R.E.M album, and hopefully me talking for this long about it has helped expand perhaps your perspective on what the album might be. The next time I talk about R.E.M will be New Adventures in Hi-Fi, and that will happen when the album is re-released at the end of next month on Marble Vinyl. Thank you, stay beautiful, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.